I sent a text message to the family group chat. My flight lands at 6 in the evening. Can anyone pick me up? I had just buried my husband. My son replied. We're swamped. Call an Uber. My daughter-in-law added. Why didn't you plan this better? I simply typed back. No problem. What they saw on the news that night made them drop their wine glasses to the floor. I am 70 years old, and on that day, that damn day, I had just said goodbye forever to the man with whom I shared 43 years of life. 43 years of waking up next to the same person, of sharing morning coffee, of walking hand in hand through the park on Sundays. 43 years that ended in a hospital bed, with machines beeping and me holding his hand while he slipped away. I am not going to be dramatic. I am not going to say my world collapsed because I have heard that phrase too many times in the last few weeks. What I will say is that when I left the cemetery, with my black clothes sticking to my body from the unbearable heat and my shoes covered in dirt, the only thing I wanted was to get home, lock the door, and not have to speak to anyone for days. But there was a problem. I was 200 miles away from my home. I had traveled alone because my son Michael told me he could not join me. Work, responsibilities, commitments. He always has something more important. I took a flight at 6 in the morning. I arrived at the wake. I stood for hours receiving hugs from people I barely knew. I heard empty words of comfort. I watched them lower the casket into the ground. I threw the first handful of dirt onto the wood, and then I just stood there, staring at that hole in the ground where I had just left the only person who truly knew me. When it was all over, I walked to the street and called a cab to take me to the airport. The driver tried to make small talk. I think he asked if I had been to a special event because I was wearing formal clothes. I did not answer. I just stared out the window. The streets passed by in a blur. People walked fast, in a hurry, full of life. I felt like a ghost, as if I no longer belonged to this world, but not to the other one either. As if I were floating in an intermediate space where nothing makes sense and everything hurts too much. I arrived at the airport 3 hours before my flight. I had nowhere else to go. I sat on one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs, surrounded by loud families, running children, couples holding hands. Everyone seemed to have a destination, a purpose. I only had exhaustion, an exhaustion so deep my bones ached. I took out my phone. The battery was at 20%. I opened the family group chat. That group that Jessica, my daughter-in-law, created 2 years ago to keep us connected. What irony. The last message was from a week ago, a photo of them at a fancy restaurant. Glasses of wine, perfect smiles, food that cost more than I spend on groceries in a month. I typed the message. My flight lands at 6 in the evening. Can anyone pick me up? I did not ask for much. I did not ask them to come to the funeral. I did not ask them to stay with me at the hospital during those last nights when my husband was agonizing and I slept in a plastic chair. I did not ask them to call me to ask how I was. I only asked that someone pick me up at the airport. 30 minutes of their time, maybe 40 with traffic. Michael's answer came fast. Too fast. We're swamped. Call an Uber. 6 words. That was all I received from my son the day I buried his stepfather, the man who raised him since he was 5, the man who taught him to ride a bike, who paid for his college, who was at his wedding even though he was already sick and the doctors had told him he should not travel. 6 cold words, without apologies, without explanation. But the worst came later. Jessica wrote, "Why didn't you plan this better?" I read that message 3 times. 4. 5. I tried to find some sense in it that was not pure cruelty. Maybe she was genuinely asking. Maybe she did not understand that when your husband dies after months of agony, when you have spent all your savings on treatments that did not work, when you have slept in hospital chairs for weeks, when the end finally comes and you have to organize a funeral in another city because that is where his family is, you do not have the energy to plan anything else. You just want to survive the next day, and the next, and the next. My fingers trembled when I wrote the answer. No problem. 2 words. Short, simple, calm. I did not give them the pleasure of knowing how much it hurt. I did not give them the satisfaction of seeing me beg. I did not show them the tears that were already starting to burn my eyes. Just 2 words, and then I put the phone in my purse. I sat there, in the middle of that noisy airport, surrounded by strangers, feeling lonelier than I had ever felt in my life. And that includes the nights at the hospital, when my husband slept sedated and I listened to the constant beeping of the machines. At least there I had his hand to hold. Now I had nothing. Nobody. The flight was delayed 40 minutes. When we finally boarded, I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. I sat by the window. A guy in a suit opened his laptop immediately. He did not look at me. Better that way. I did not want explanations. I did not want pity. I just wanted to get home. During the flight, I thought about calling a car service like Michael had suggested. I thought about the app he taught me to use a few months ago. I thought about how much it would charge me. $30. Maybe $40. It is not that I did not have the money. It is just that it was not about that. It was about the fact that my son did not want to give me 30 minutes of his time the day I buried my husband. It was about the fact that my daughter-in-law thought I should have planned my own grief better. The plane landed exactly at 6 in the evening. I took my bag from the overhead bin and walked slowly down the aisle. My knees hurt, my back too. Every step was an effort. I walked out of the security area and looked around. Families hugging, drivers with signs, couples kissing. I reached for my phone to call that ride Michael had so generously recommended. But then something changed. I do not know what it was exactly. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the accumulated rage. Maybe it was that in that moment, standing in the middle of that airport, I realized I had spent 70 years of my life putting myself last, 70 years saying yes to everything, 70 years without inconveniencing anyone, 70 years being invisible. I put the phone away. I walked toward the exit. The cold night air hit my face. It was colder than I remembered. Much colder. I raised my hand to hail a cab at the curb, but none stopped. I tried again. Nothing. The third time a taxi finally slowed down. But when the driver rolled down the window and saw me in my funeral clothes and my face of a woman who just buried her husband, he sped up and left. I waited 30 minutes on that curb, maybe 40. I lost count. The cold was getting into my bones. My fingers were numb. Finally, I got a cab. I gave him my address. The driver nodded and took off. During the whole ride, he did not say a word. Neither did I. I just watched the city lights pass by the window, wondering how I had gotten to this, how I had reached the point of paying $40 to a stranger to take me home the day I buried my husband because my own family was too busy. When we arrived at my house, it was almost 8 at night. I paid. I got out of the taxi and stood in front of my door. The house was completely dark, cold, empty. I searched for the keys in my purse with trembling fingers. I opened the door. The silence hit me like a wall. This was my home. The place where I had lived the last 20 years with my husband. The place where we had grown old together. And now it was completely empty. I closed the door behind me. I did not turn on the lights. I did not have the strength. I just walked to the sofa and let myself fall. And there, in the darkness of my own house, I finally cried. I cried for my husband. I cried for me. I cried for those 6 words from my son. I cried for that cruel question from my daughter-in-law. I cried because I realized I had spent my whole life taking care of others, and now that I needed to be taken care of, there was no one. But what I did not know, what none of them knew, is that that quiet night was about to turn into something completely different, something that would make them drop their wine glasses to the floor when they saw it on the news, something that would change everything forever. I know you are there. I know you are listening to me. And I know exactly why you are still here with me in this moment. Because you recognize something in my story. Because maybe you too have felt that loneliness that comes when the people who are supposed to love you simply do not show up. When your children are too busy. When your family has more important things to do. When you realize that all that love you gave for decades guarantees absolutely nothing. I am not going to lie to you telling you that all this has a happy ending where we all hug and cry together. It does not work like that. Real life is not a movie. But I will tell you that what happened that night, what happened in the hours following that moment I collapsed on the sofa of my own empty house, changed absolutely everything. Not just for me. For all of them too. Stay with me. I know it is painful. I know maybe this reminds you of things you have lived yourself, but I need you to be here because what comes next is not just my story. It is the story of many of us. The mothers who gave everything and one day realized we had disappeared in the process. The wives who lost our partners and discovered we had been left alone long before they were gone. The women who reach 70 years old and wonder where all that love we planted for so long went. Because that is what I did. I planted love. During 50 years of my life, that was the only thing I did. I planted love in my son when he was a baby crying at night, and I got up every 2 hours even though I had to work the next day. I planted love when I gave up finishing my college degree because someone had to stay home. I planted love when my husband got sick for the first time 10 years ago, and I became his nurse, his partner, his support. I planted love in every meal I cooked, in every scraped knee I healed, in every night I stayed awake worrying about others. And now I am here, sitting in the darkness of my own house, wondering where those fruits are. Where is the harvest of all that love I sowed? The answer is simple and brutal. There is no harvest. Because it turns out you can give all of yourself for decades and still end up completely alone the day you need someone the most. But do not misunderstand me. I am not looking for your pity. I already had enough pity at the funeral, enough pats on the back, enough "I am so sorries" from people who will not remember my name tomorrow. What I am looking for is for you to understand, that you see what I saw that night, that you feel what I felt when I realized I had reached a point in my life where I had to make a decision. Because that is what happened there. On that sofa, in the dark, I made a decision. It was not conscious at first. It was not something I planned. But somewhere between the tears and the silence, something inside me broke. Or maybe it fixed itself. I am not sure yet. But something changed. I stayed on that sofa for hours. I do not know how many exactly. Time had ceased to make sense. Outside it got completely dark. The house was so cold I could see my own breath. I had forgotten to turn on the heat before leaving for the funeral, or maybe I had turned it off to save money. The last few months with my husband in the hospital had drained our accounts. Insurance covered some things, but not everything. The experimental drugs the doctors suggested cost $800 each. The alternative therapies that might help, $500 a session. Everything paid from our savings. Everything paid with the money we had saved for 40 years for our retirement. And my son knew it. Michael knew exactly how much we had spent. He knew I had sold my car last year. He knew I had canceled my dental insurance to be able to pay for another month of treatment. He knew all that, and still he had told me to call a cab. $40 that I did not need to spend if he had simply driven 30 minutes to the airport. But it was not about the money. It was never about the money. It was about the fact that I did not matter enough. It was about the fact that picking up your 70-year-old mother the day she buried her husband was not a priority. It was about the fact that there was something more important. There was always something more important. I thought about sending him a text, about telling him how I felt, about explaining what it meant to me that he told me that. But then I remembered all the previous times I had tried to explain how I felt, all the times I had tried to tell him I felt lonely, that I needed to see him more often, that I missed having a real relationship with him. And I remembered how that conversation always ended, with him telling me I was being dramatic, with Jessica telling me they had their own lives, with me feeling guilty for asking for something as simple as time with my own son. So I did not send any message. I stayed there, sitting in the dark, feeling the cold getting more and more intense. I should have gotten up. I should have turned on the heat. I should have eaten something because I had not tasted a bite since morning. I should have done many things. But I did not have strength for anything. It is strange how the body simply shuts down when you have reached your limit, as if it knew you cannot take anymore and decided for you that it is time to stop. My eyes were closing on their own. My breathing was becoming slower and slower. The cold did not bother me as much anymore. Or maybe it bothered me more, but I no longer had the energy to notice. The last thing I thought about before everything became blurry was my husband. About how he used to hug me at night when it was cold. About how he always made sure I was comfortable before falling asleep. About how, even in his last days, when he could barely move, he reached for me with his hand to make sure I was there. He never left me alone. Not once in 43 years. And now that he was not there, I discovered that being alone was much worse than I had imagined. But now understand this. Understand why I need you to still be here with me. Because what happened next was not just something that happened to me, it was something that could happen to any of us. To you, to your mother, to your grandmother, to any woman who has reached this age and realized that the people she gave everything for simply are not there when she needs them. And what happened that night, what they discovered when they turned on the news while drinking their glasses of wine in their warm and comfortable house, was something they never expected. Something that forced them to face exactly what kind of people they had become. Something that made those glasses fall from their hands and shatter on the floor. But to understand that, to understand how we got there, you need to know more. You need to know who I was before becoming this 70-year-old woman sitting alone on a sofa. You need to know what I sacrificed, what I gave, what I left behind. You need to know the full story. And believe me, it is a story worth hearing. Because in the end, it is not just about what they did to me. It is about what I finally decided to do about it. So stay. Please, stay and listen. Because what is coming is the truth. The truth about a family that looked perfect from the outside. The truth about a son who forgot where he came from. The truth about a woman who finally had enough. And the truth about a night that changed everything. Let me tell you who I really am. Not the woman who was lying on that sofa that night, but who I was before. Before exhaustion became my permanent state. Before every movement hurt. Before looking in the mirror meant seeing a stranger with deep wrinkles and tired eyes I no longer recognize as mine. I am 70. 70. When I was young, that number seemed impossible to me. I thought that by 70 I would be dead or so close to being so that it would not matter. But here I am, alive, conscious, and discovering that 70 means something completely different from what I imagined. It means pain in the knees every morning. It means climbing stairs is no longer automatic, but something that requires planning. It means pills for blood pressure, pills for cholesterol, pills for sleeping, pills for pain. It means your body is no longer yours. It is a collection of things that are slowly breaking, and you are just trying to keep them working one more day. One more day. That has been my mantra for the last few years, especially during the last few months caring for my husband. One more day with him, one more day holding his hand, one more day listening to his breathing, even though it was getting weaker. But that night, sitting on that sofa, I was no longer sure I wanted one more day. Not of this life, not of this version of me that was left after losing everything. Because I did not just lose my husband that day. I lost the last person in the world who saw me as something more than a burden. The last person who worried if I ate, if I slept, if I was okay. My body was destroyed, not just by age, but by everything that had happened in the last few months. I had lost almost 30 pounds. Not on purpose, I simply forgot to eat. I was so focused on making sure my husband took his meds on time, that he ate even if he did not want to, that he was comfortable, that my own food stopped mattering. Some nights I ate half a sandwich standing in the hospital kitchen at 2 in the morning. That was all. I slept 3, maybe 4 hours a night, and it was not real sleep. It was that dozing in the chair next to his bed, where any sound woke me up. Any change in his breathing put me on alert. The doctors told me I should go home, that I should rest. But how could I? How could I leave him alone? What if he woke up in the night and I was not there? What if he needed me and I had decided my comfort was more important? So I stayed, night after night, week after week, until my back became a permanent knot of pain, until my eyes burned all the time, until walking from the hospital to the parking lot felt like climbing a mountain, and my son knew it. Michael came to visit us once a week, maybe, if he did not have something more important to do. He stayed 20 minutes, half an hour max. He would come in, say hi to his stepfather, ask me how I was with that voice you use when you do not really want to know the answer, and leave. He always had a meeting, an important dinner, something he could not cancel. Jessica came twice in 6 months. Twice. And both times she stayed standing at the door of the room as if she were afraid to come in, as if sickness were contagious, as if seeing a dying man was too uncomfortable for her. She talked about how busy she was with her job, with her friends, with her yoga class, and I nodded and smiled because that is what I do. That is what I have always done. But that night, on that sofa, there was nothing left of that woman who smiled and nodded. That woman had stayed somewhere between the hospital and the cemetery, between the words, "I am so sorry, and we are busy, call an Uber," between who I was and who I had become. I lived alone now, officially alone. Not just because my husband had died, but because I had been feeling alone for years, even when he was there. Because illness does not just take the person, it takes the conversations. It takes the laughter. It takes everything that made that person who they were. The last few months with him were like living with a ghost. He was there, but he was not really there. And now, the house was completely empty. 4 rooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen where we used to cook together on Sundays, a living room where we watched movies cuddled on the sofa, a garden he tended with so much love. Everything empty, everything silent, everything cold. The heat had been off since I left in the morning, maybe since before. I did not remember turning it on the day before either. The thermostat read 50 degrees. 50 degrees in a house where a 70-year-old woman lived, who had just buried her husband and who had gone more than 24 hours without eating or sleeping properly. But I did not get up. I could not. My body simply did not respond. It was as if every part of me had decided that it was enough, that I had endured too much, that it was time to give up. My legs were numb, my arms weighed tons, my head spun every time I tried to move it. I was thirsty, a horrible thirst that burned my throat. But the kitchen was 30 feet away, and those 30 feet felt like miles. I thought about calling someone, asking for help. But who? My son was busy. My daughter-in-law thought I should plan better. My friends? Well, most of my friends had also lost their husbands and were dealing with their own grief. I was not going to bother them with mine. So I stayed there, shivering, feeling the cold getting deeper and deeper into my bones, feeling my body giving up little by little. And a part of me, a very small but very real part, thought that maybe this was okay. Maybe this was easier. Maybe giving up was the answer. But then I thought about something. I thought about my son and my daughter-in-law sitting in their warm living room, with their fireplace lit, with their glasses of wine, probably watching some series on their $3,000 TV. I thought about how they had gone on with their day after telling me to call a cab. I thought about how they probably hadn't even asked themselves if I got home okay, if I was okay, if I needed anything. And that thought ignited something in me. It was not rage yet. It was something deeper. It was the clear and brutal understanding that I did not matter. Not to them. Maybe I had never mattered. Maybe everything I had done for Michael for 45 years, all the sleepless nights when he was a baby, all the sacrifices, all the love, had meant absolutely nothing. My health was destroyed, not just because of that night, but because of years of putting everyone else first. Years of not going to the doctor because we had to pay for Michael's college. Years of not buying my meds because my husband needed his. Years of eating leftovers because I had to make sure they ate well. Years of not sleeping because someone had to be awake, caring, worrying, keeping it all running. And now my body was sending me the bill. Every day was harder. Every movement required more effort. And the only thing I had asked was for someone to pick me up at the airport. 30 minutes. That was all. And I did not even deserve that. The cold was getting more intense. Or maybe I was getting weaker. I was not sure. Both probably. My fingers were so numb I no longer felt them. My breathing had become shallow. Every inhalation hurt. Every exhalation required a conscious effort. I closed my eyes. Just for a moment. Just to rest. That is what I told myself. Just a moment of rest, and then I would get up. I would turn on the furnace. I would eat something. I would drink water. I would do all the things a responsible 70-year-old person should do to take care of herself. But that moment turned into minutes. And the minutes probably turned into hours. I do not know. I lost track of time. I lost track of everything except the cold and the exhaustion and that overwhelming feeling that finally, I could stop. I could stop fighting. I could stop being strong. I could simply give up and let whatever was going to happen, happen. And that was exactly what I did. But before you completely understand what happened that night, you need to know how we got there. You need to know how a mother who gave everything for her son ended up being treated like an inconvenience. Because this did not happen overnight. It was a slow process. So slow I did not even realize until it was already too late. Michael was not always like this. When he was little, he hugged me before sleeping and told me I was the best mom in the world. When he was 10, he drew pictures for me at school and came running to show them to me. When he turned 15, he still gave me a kiss on the cheek before going to school. But something changed. I do not know exactly when. Maybe it was gradual. Maybe it was when he met Jessica. Jessica entered our lives when Michael was 28. She was ambitious, smart, pretty. She came from a family with money. Her father owned 3 car dealerships. Her mother had never worked a day in her life. They lived in a 2-story house with a pool and a housekeeper, the complete opposite of us. The first time she came to dinner at our house, I saw her looking around with that expression. You know which one? That expression of someone who is evaluating and judging and finding everything insufficient. Our old furniture, our small kitchen, our mismatched plates. Everything was too humble for her. I prepared my best meal that night. I spent all day cooking, roast chicken with potatoes, fresh salad, homemade bread. I set the table with the tablecloth we only used on special occasions. I even bought flowers for the centerpiece. I spent $50 we really could not spend, but I wanted her to see that we were a good family, that her boyfriend came from a good home. She ate little. She said she was watching her weight for an event she had next week. She pushed the food from one side of the plate to the other. She smiled politely when I asked about her job. She answered with monosyllables. And when they left that night, I heard Michael apologizing to her in the car. Apologizing for me, for our house, for our food. That should have been my first sign. But I wanted my son to be happy. And if she made him happy, then I was going to accept her. I was going to make the effort. I was going to be the best mother-in-law possible. They got married 2 years later. The wedding cost $30,000. $30,000. Jessica's father paid most of it, but they still expected us to contribute. It is tradition, Jessica said. The groom's family must pay for certain things. So my husband and I emptied our savings account. $5,000. Everything we had saved for emergencies, for their wedding. The ceremony was in a fancy hall on the other side of town. I wore a dress I bought on sale for $120. I felt out of place all day. The guests from Jessica's family wore designer clothes, expensive jewelry, perfumes that probably cost more than my entire outfit. The guests on our side were us, me, my sister, and 2 cousins. 5 women in a sea of elegant strangers. During the reception, Jessica's mother gave a speech about how her daughter deserved the best, and how she was sure Michael was going to provide exactly that. She did not mention our family once. She did not thank us for our $5,000. She did not recognize the 30 years I had spent raising the man who was now marrying her precious daughter. Michael did not say anything either. In his speech, he thanked Jessica's parents for their generosity. He talked about admiring their success, about how he wanted to build a similar life for his future family. He did not mention us, neither me nor my husband, as if we hadn't existed, as if he had reached his 28 years completely alone. After the wedding, the visits became less frequent. At first, they came every 2 weeks, then once a month, then every 2 months. There was always an excuse. Work, trips, social commitments, the new house they were buying, the renovations they were doing, always something more important. I called. Of course I called. Every week I dialed his number. Sometimes Michael answered, "Hi, Mom. I am busy. I'll call you later." And he never called later. Sometimes Jessica answered, "Michael is not available right now. Do you want to leave a message?" As if I were a client calling an office. I tried to adapt. I tried to be less demanding, less needy. I stopped calling every week. I only called on special occasions, birthdays, Christmas, New Year's. And even then, half the time, they did not even answer. When my husband got sick for the first time 10 years ago, I sent Michael a text. "Your father is in the hospital. They need to run some tests." He took 6 hours to reply. "Okay, keep me posted." That was all. Not "I am coming over." Not "Do you need anything?" Just "keep me posted." As if his father were a work project that needed periodic updates. After that first scare, my husband recovered. but he was never the same again. The doctors said he had to take care of himself. Less stress, better diet, more rest. So I became his caregiver. I cooked special meals. I made sure he took his meds. I went with him to all his medical appointments. And Michael went on with his life. They bought a bigger house, $300,000. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, garden with a pool. He sent me photos. "Look, Mom, we finally made it." Yes, they made it. With the money they had saved, because we paid for his college, because we bought him his first car, because we gave him the down payment for his first apartment. But he never mentioned it. It was as if all that had been erased from his memory, as if he had gotten to where he was completely on his own, as if we had not sacrificed anything so he could have opportunities we never had. The criticism started subtly. "Mom, do you still use that old phone? You should upgrade. Mom, your house needs maintenance. It looks neglected. Mom, why don't you hire someone to help with the cleaning? You are too old to be doing that alone." I was 65, not 90. I could still clean my own house. I could still cook. I could still do everything I had always done. But to him, I was already old. I was already a burden. I was already someone who needed constant help. Jessica was worse. Her comments came wrapped in fake concern. "Eleanor, are you sure you should drive? At your age, it is dangerous. Eleanor, did you eat today? You look very thin. You have to take better care of yourself. Eleanor, those clothes are very outdated. Want me to take you shopping?" As if I were a child who needed supervision. I tried to talk to Michael about this once. 3 years ago, I called him and told him I needed to talk to him about something important. He came to the house the next day. He sat on the sofa, checking his phone, while I tried to explain how I felt, how it hurt me that they didn't visit us anymore, how I missed having a real relationship with him, how sometimes I felt invisible to them. He sighed. He put the phone down for a moment and looked at me with that expression of forced patience you use with someone who is being irrational. "Mom, you are not being invisible. We are simply busy. We have our own lives. We cannot be coming here every week. You have to understand that." "I am not asking you to come every week," I told him. "I am just asking you to see me, to include me in your life once in a while." "We include you," he replied. "We call you. We send you messages. We come when we can. What else do you want?" What else did I want? I wanted what we had before. I wanted the son who hugged me. I wanted to feel like I mattered. I wanted not to have to beg for basic attention. But I did not say any of that. I just said, "You are right. Sorry for bothering you." And there I was again, apologizing, making myself small, accepting the crumbs they gave me, and thanking them for them. When my husband got worse a year ago, when the doctors said this time it was serious, when we had to hospitalize him for the first time of many, I called Michael crying. "I need help," I told him. "I cannot do this alone." "Mom, hire a nurse," he replied. "There are services for this." "We do not have money for a private nurse," I told him. "Then use the insurance." "Insurance does not cover everything," he sighed again. "How much do you need?" "I am not asking you for money. I am asking you to come, to be here, to help me with the decisions, to support me." "Mom, I have work. I cannot just drop everything and go to the hospital every day." "I am not asking for every day. Just, sometimes, once in a while. I will try to go this week," he said. And he hung up. He did not come that week, nor the next. He came 3 weeks later. He stayed 15 minutes. He said his father looked good. He said I looked tired and that I should take better care of myself. And he left, back to his life, back to his big house, back to his wife who thought I should plan better. Let me take you back in time, much further back. Because to completely understand how we got to that moment on the sofa, you need to know my whole story. You need to know who I was before becoming a mother, before becoming a wife. When I was still just Eleanor, just me. I was 19 when I met my first husband, Michael's father. He was handsome, charismatic, full of promises about the future we were going to build together. I fell in love like you can only fall in love at 19, with everything, without reservations, without doubts. I thought I had found the love of my life. We got married 6 months later. I was in my sophomore year of college, studying to be a teacher. I loved it. I loved learning. I loved the idea of teaching others. I had plans. I wanted to finish my degree, work in a school, maybe eventually become a principal. I had big dreams for a girl who came from a family where no one had gone to college. I got pregnant 3 months after the wedding. We didn't plan it. I was taking precautions, but it failed. When I saw those 2 lines on the test, I cried. Not of happiness, of fear. I was 20. I was still a child myself. I was not ready to be a mother. I was not ready to leave my dreams. But my husband was excited. "We are going to be parents," he said. "This is wonderful." And I tried to convince myself he was right. I tried to get excited. I tried to see this as a blessing and not as the end of everything I had planned for my life. My belly grew and my classes became harder. I was tired all the time. The morning sickness lasted 6 full months. I could not concentrate on studying. My grades dropped. The professors looked at me with pity. A pregnant 20-year-old girl trying to finish college. Everyone knew how this story would end. Michael was born when I was 21. It was a difficult birth. 22 hours of labor. Complications. The doctors said I should not have more children. My body would not withstand it. So there I was, 21 years old, an incomplete degree, a baby, and a husband who had started to change. The first few months were the hardest of my life. Michael cried constantly. I did not sleep. My husband worked long hours, and when he got home, he wanted peace and quiet. "You can't make him stop crying," he would say, as if I had some magic button to press. I tried to go back to college when Michael was 6 months old. I lasted 3 weeks. Between classes, the baby, the house, my husband, there were not enough hours in the day. There was not enough of me for everyone. So I left school. It is temporary, I told myself. I will go back when he is older. I never went back. Because when Michael was 2, my husband left. He simply left. One day I came home and found a note on the kitchen table. "I cannot do this. I am sorry." That was all. 3 years of marriage summarized in 6 words. He took his clothes, his computer, and half the money in our joint account. $800. He left me with $400, a toddler, and rent I could not pay alone. The next few months were a nightmare. I got a job as a waitress, the only job I could find without a college degree. I earned $6 an hour, plus tips. I worked double shifts when I could. My sister watched Michael while I worked. I paid her $50 a week. It was all I could give her. I got home at 11 at night with swollen feet and a destroyed back. Michael was already asleep. I showered quickly, checked that he was covered, and collapsed into my bed. 4 hours later, I got up again to get him ready to go to my sister's. That was my life for 3 years. I met my second husband when Michael was 5, Arthur. He was a regular at the diner where I worked. He always ordered the same thing: black coffee and apple pie. He always left a good tip. He was always kind. One day he asked me if I wanted to grab coffee with him when I finished my shift. I said yes. Not because I was looking for a relationship, but because it had been so long since someone saw me as something more than a waitress or an exhausted mother. Arthur was different. He was calm, stable, worked in construction. He did not have big dreams or big plans. He just wanted a simple life. A good woman, a modest house, maybe a garden to plant tomatoes. And after years of chaos and hardship, that simplicity sounded like heaven. We got married a year later. He adopted Michael formally. "He is my son now," he said, and he treated him like that. He taught him to ride a bike. He went to his baseball games. He helped him with homework. He was the father Michael needed, the father his biological father never was. "I stopped working as a waitress when we got married," Arthur insisted. "I want you to be home with Michael," he said. "I want you to have time for yourself, too. To rest. To be happy." And for the first time in years, I breathed. For the first time since I was 20, I was not in constant survival mode. But being a housewife was not easy either. It was different, but not easy. Because now my entire identity was tied to being a mother and wife. I was no longer Eleanor who wanted to be a teacher. I was Eleanor, Arthur's wife. Eleanor, Michael's mother. My whole life revolved around other people, and little by little, without realizing it, I started to disappear. Michael grew up, from little boy to teenager. Arthur and I worked hard. Him in construction, earning enough to support us, but never enough to save much. I managed every penny that came into the house. I bought food on sale. I sewed Michael's clothes when they tore instead of buying new ones. I turned off lights in empty rooms. I used coupons for everything. That was how we survived. When Michael started college, we did not have money to pay for it. So I worked again. I found work cleaning houses. 3 houses a week, $30 per house, $90 extra a week that went directly to Michael's tuition. Arthur worked overtime on weekends. Between the two of us, we made it. 4 years, $40,000 total for his education. Every extra penny we earned during those 4 years was for him. And he made it. He graduated. He got a good job. He started earning more money in a month than Arthur earned in 3. And we were proud. So proud. We thought it had all been worth it. All those sacrifices, all those sleepless nights, all that hard work. It had been worth it because our son had a better future. But something happened after he graduated. Something changed in him. Or maybe it had always been there, and I hadn't seen it. He started to be ashamed of us, of our small house, of our humble jobs, of our way of speaking, of our simple clothes. He loved us, I think, but he was also ashamed of us. When he met Jessica and her family with money, that shame intensified. He started inventing excuses not to bring her home. When he finally brought her, he apologized for everything. For the furniture, for the food, for us. And I let it slide, because I thought it was just a phase. I thought he would eventually mature and realize that money is not what makes a family. But he never matured. Or maybe he did, but in the wrong direction. He became someone who measured people's worth by their bank account, by the size of their house, by the brand of their clothes. And us, with our 2-bedroom house and our simple jobs, simply did not make the cut. Arthur noticed it before me. He is changing, he told me. He is no longer the same boy we raised. And I defended him. He is just adjusting to his new life, I said. Give him time. But Arthur was right. Michael was changing, and not for the better. Years passed. Arthur started getting sick. First, it was small things. Back pain from all those years in construction. Knee problems, high blood pressure. The doctor said he needed to reduce stress, work less. But we could not afford that. We still had bills to pay. We still had a mortgage. So he kept working, and he kept getting sicker, and I became his caregiver on top of everything else. I cooked special meals. I drove him to medical appointments. I made sure he took his meds. And Michael went on with his life, visiting us less and less, calling less and less, drifting further away. A year ago, when Arthur really got worse, when the doctors said his heart was failing and he needed constant care, I thought Michael would come. I thought he would finally realize his father needed him, that I needed him. But he did not come. He sent texts, asking how his father was, but he never came. He never sat with me in those waiting rooms. He never held my hand when the doctors gave us bad news. He was never there when we needed him most. The taxi dropped me off in front of my house that night, and while I searched for the keys with trembling fingers, a part of me still had hope. A small and pathetic hope that maybe, just maybe, Michael had changed his mind. Maybe he had come while I was on my way. Maybe he had entered with his emergency key I gave him years ago and had turned on the furnace. Maybe he had bought some food. Maybe he was there waiting for me with a sincere apology for telling me to call a cab the day I buried his father. But when I opened the door, the darkness and silence told me everything I needed to know. There was no one. The house was exactly as I had left it that morning when I ran out to catch my flight. Cold, empty, abandoned. I closed the door behind me and stood in the entryway for a moment. The thermostat on the wall read 50 degrees, 50 degrees. I should have left it at 60 at least before leaving. But honestly, I did not remember thinking about it. My head was somewhere else that morning. At the funeral, saying goodbye to Arthur, surviving that day. I walked to the thermostat to turn it up, but my fingers were so cold I could not turn the dial correctly. I tried 3 times, 4. Finally, I managed to move it to 65. The furnace would make a noise and start working. That is what was supposed to happen. Nothing happened. I waited a minute. 2. Nothing. I pressed the reset button several times. Nothing. The furnace was dead. Completely dead. I stood there, staring at that useless thermostat, and something inside me broke. I did not cry. I had no tears left. I just felt that last piece of hope crumbling. Of course the furnace was not working. Of course, because that is exactly the kind of thing that would happen on the worst day of my life. The furnace had been making strange noises the last few weeks. Arthur always fixed it himself. He knew every corner of this house, every pipe, every wire, every problem. But Arthur was gone. And I had no idea how to fix a furnace. I did not even know where to start. I thought about calling someone, a technician, but it was almost 8 at night. An emergency service would charge me $200 just to come out, maybe $300, and then whatever the repair cost, $400 total, $500. I did not have that money. The funeral expenses had emptied what little was left in our accounts. I thought about calling Michael, about telling him the heat was not working and I needed help. But then I remembered his message. We're swamped. Call an Uber. If he could not give me 30 minutes to pick me up at the airport, would he come fix my furnace at 8 at night? I already knew the answer, so I did not call anyone. I climbed the stairs slowly, holding onto the railing because my legs barely held me. I went to my room and looked in the closet for all the blankets I could find. 2. I only had 2 extra blankets. Arthur and I had donated most of our old things last year, when he still thought he was going to get better. New year, new life, he had said. What irony! I went down the stairs again with the blankets in my arms. Every step was an effort. My knees protested. My back burned. I reached the sofa and let myself fall. I spread one blanket over the cushions and wrapped myself in the other. I was still cold, a cold that came from inside, a cold that no blanket could warm. I took out my phone, 20% battery. I opened the family group chat again. I read the messages again. We're swamped. Call an Uber. Why didn't you plan this better? My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to type something. I wanted to tell them exactly how I felt. I wanted to tell them that their indifference was killing me, that their coldness hurt more than anything physical I could feel. But I did not write anything, because what was the point? If they did not care that I had just buried their father, why would they care that I was cold, that I was alone, that I needed help? It was already clear that my needs were not their priority, that I was not their priority. I put the phone away. I closed my eyes. I tried to sleep, but the cold was too intense. My teeth chattered. My body shook uncontrollably. I huddled deeper into the blankets, but it did not help. Nothing helped. I got up from the sofa. I needed to do something. I needed to move. Maybe that would warm me up. I walked to the kitchen. I opened the refrigerator looking for something to eat. Almost empty. An expired yogurt, half an onion, a bottle of ketchup, that was all. I had not eaten all day, but I was not hungry. My stomach had closed hours ago. I filled a glass with tap water and drank it in one gulp. The cold water went down my throat like ice. It made me shiver more. I left the glass in the sink and went back to the sofa. Every step required conscious effort. Every movement was like moving weights. I wrapped myself in the blankets again. I checked my phone. 15% battery. No new messages. No missed calls. Nobody had wondered if I got home okay. Nobody had thought about me at all. I thought about the neighbors. Arthur was friends with some of them, especially Mr. Miller. Artie, the man at number 32. They had the same name. They always made jokes about that. They sat on the porch on Sundays drinking coffee and talking about baseball. Maybe I could go to his house, ask him to lend me a space heater, or just stay there a few hours until I warmed up a bit. But it was late, almost 9. I could not just show up at his door at this hour. Besides, Artie was older than me. He was 75. Hearing problems. He was probably already asleep. I was not going to bother him, so I stayed where I was, shivering, waiting for my body to get used to the cold, waiting for exhaustion to eventually overcome me and let me sleep, waiting for tomorrow to be better. It had to be better. It could not be worse. The phone vibrated in my hand. My heart jumped. Maybe it was Michael. Maybe he had finally realized he had been cruel. Maybe he was calling to apologize, to ask me if I was okay, to tell me he was on his way. But it was not Michael. It was an automated message from the bank. Your account has a low balance. Current balance, $42. $42. That was all I had left until Arthur's pension check arrived at the end of the month. 12 days away. 12 days with $42. Enough for basic food if I shopped smart, but not enough to repair the furnace. Not enough for emergencies. Not enough for anything except surviving day by day. I closed the message. 10% battery. I put the phone in power-saving mode. I needed it to last until tomorrow just in case. Just in case what? I was not sure. But I needed to have it working. Hours passed. I do not know how many. I lost track of time. Only the cold and the silence and the darkness existed. My thoughts became confused. I started seeing things in the shadows. Arthur's silhouette standing in the corner, his voice calling me. But when I blinked, nothing was there. I tried to get up. I thought maybe I should go upstairs, get in bed, use all the blankets I could find. But when I tried to stand, my legs did not respond. It was as if they were not connected to my brain. I moved my toes. I barely felt them. I moved my hands. They were numb. This was not right. A part of me knew it. A very small and increasingly distant part of my brain screamed that this was dangerous, that 50 degrees was not safe, that a 70-year-old woman could not simply stay in a house without heat all night, that I needed help. But that voice was very weak, and I was so tired, so terribly tired, more tired than I had been in my whole life. And the sofa was soft, and the blankets were heavy, and closing my eyes was so easy, so temptingly easy. Just for a moment, I told myself, I am just going to close my eyes for a moment, then I will get up, I will call someone, I will ask for help, I will do the right thing. But I did not get up, I did not call anyone, I did not do anything. I just closed my eyes and let the cold wrap around me like one more blanket, an icy blanket that got into my bones and made everything slower, my breathing, my heart, my thoughts. I dreamed of Arthur, of when we were young, of our first apartment. It was small and cold in winter, but we had each other. We cuddled under the blankets, and he held me, and I felt completely safe, completely loved, completely home. Eleanor, he said in the dream, you have to get up. You have to ask for help. I am tired, I answered him. Let me sleep a little longer. You cannot sleep now. It is dangerous. You have to get up. But I did not want to get up. I wanted to stay there with him, in that warm moment of the past, where everything was still okay, where we still had a future, where there was still hope. The dream faded. Or maybe I sank deeper into it. I was not sure. Everything became blurry. The cold, the sofa, the darkness. Everything mixed into one single thing, and that thing swallowed me whole. I do not know how much time passed. Maybe hours, maybe minutes. Time had ceased to exist in the normal way. It existed only in fragments, moments of consciousness followed by darkness, darkness followed by more darkness, and cold, always cold. At some point I opened my eyes. Or I thought I opened them. The living room was dark, but there was a strange light, bluish. I thought maybe it was dawning, but it made no sense. The light came from the wrong direction. I tried to focus my sight. It was my phone. The screen had turned on by itself. 5% battery. A notification. Another message from the family group chat. I moved my hand to reach the phone. My fingers did not obey correctly. They moved slow, clumsy, as if they belonged to someone else. Finally, I managed to grab it. The screen was blurry. I blinked several times trying to focus. The message was from Jessica. A photo. Them in their living room. Michael on the big leather sofa that cost $4,000. Jessica next to him, wine glasses in their hands. The fireplace lit behind them. Perfect smiles. The text said, "Perfect night at home. Perfect night." While I was here dying of cold, they were having a perfect night. Wine, fireplace, heat, comfort. Everything I did not have. Everything they had denied me with 6 cruel words earlier that day. I wanted to reply. I wanted to tell them exactly what I thought. I wanted to send them a photo of me too, A 70-year-old woman lying on a sofa, shivering under 2 insufficient blankets, in a house without heat, completely alone the day she buried her husband. "This is my perfect night," I could type. "Thanks for asking." But my fingers could not type. They could not form the words. They could barely hold the phone. I let it fall on my chest. The screen turned off. 2% battery. Soon it would turn off completely. And I would be truly alone. No way to communicate with anyone. No way to ask for help if I needed it. If I needed it. What an absurd thought. Of course I needed help. That was obvious. Even in my confused state, I could recognize that. But who was I going to call? The son who had told me to call an Uber? The daughter-in-law who thought I should plan better? The neighbors I barely knew and who were probably asleep? No, I was not going to call anyone. I was not going to beg for help. I was not going to be a burden. I was not going to inconvenience anyone else. I had already inconvenienced enough with my simple request for someone to pick me up at the airport. I was not going to make that mistake again. I closed my eyes again. The cold did not hurt as much anymore. Or maybe it hurt more, but I could no longer feel it correctly. My body felt heavy, so heavy that the sofa sank under my weight. Or maybe I was sinking. I was sinking into the sofa, into the darkness, into the cold. I was sinking, and I could not stop myself. I heard noises, or I thought I heard them. Footsteps. Voices. Someone calling my name. But it could not be real. Nobody knew I needed help. Nobody was thinking about me. Nobody would come. It was just my imagination. My brain creating what my heart desperately wanted to be real. The noises got louder. Closer. Banging. Someone banging on something. A door. My door. And a voice. A man's voice. Old but strong. "Eleanor. Eleanor. Are you there?" Artie. Artie Miller from number 32. But what was he doing there? Why was he banging on my door? I tried to answer. I tried to scream, yes, that I was there, that I needed help, but my voice did not come out. Only a weak sound, a moan that not even I could hear correctly. More banging, more shouting. I am going to kick the door down, step away from the entrance. And then a loud crash, wood cracking, metal twisting, the door flying open, light flooding the living room, a flashlight pointing straight at my face. My God, Eleanor! Artie ran toward me. I saw him in a blur, a figure moving fast, faster than a 75-year-old man should be able to move. He knelt by the sofa. His hands touched my face. "You are freezing, completely freezing. How long have you been like this?" I tried to answer. I could not. My mouth moved, but the words did not come out. Artie stood up. I heard him speak, but not to me. To someone else. A phone. He was calling someone. "I need an ambulance at 48 Oak Street. It is an emergency." A woman, 70 years old. Hypothermia, I think. I found her unconscious in her living room. "The house has no heat. It is freezing. Please, hurry." Ambulance. The word floated in my brain. Ambulance meant money. It meant hospital bills. It meant hundreds of dollars I did not have. I wanted to tell him no, not to call the ambulance, that I could not pay for that. But my voice still did not work. Artie returned to my side. He started taking the blankets off me. "I need to see how bad you are," he explained. His hands moved fast, but carefully. He touched my hands, my feet. "No pulse in the extremities," he muttered, breathing very weak. "This is bad, very bad." He brought more blankets. Where did he get them? I do not know. Maybe from his house. Maybe he found them in some closet in my house. He started wrapping me in them. Thick blankets. Warm. The contrast between the cold of my body and the heat of the blankets hurt, burned, as if my skin were on fire. "Hang in there, Eleanor," Artie said. "The ambulance is on its way. You are going to be okay. Just hang in there." But his voice trembled. I could hear the fear in it. I could hear that he was not sure I was going to be okay. I wanted to ask him how he knew I needed help, but I could not speak. I could only lie there while he kept rubbing my hands, trying to bring the circulation back, trying to keep me alive. "I saw your light go out last night," he started to explain without me asking, as if he could read my thoughts. I thought it was strange. Arthur always left the porch light on. Always. Then I thought maybe you had forgotten. But this morning I noticed it was still off. And the house looked empty, dead. I knocked on your door several times today. Nobody answered. I called your phone. You did not answer. My phone. Of course, it had run out of battery. And I had not heard it ring because I was too deep in my cold stupor. I started worrying for real this afternoon, continued Artie. I asked other neighbors if they had seen you. Nobody had seen you. Then I remembered. The funeral was today. Arthur had mentioned it to me a few weeks ago. He told me it was going to be in another city, that you had to travel alone because your son could not go with you. He paused. I heard the pain in his voice. I thought your son would at least pick you up from the airport. But when I saw your house like that, so dark, so empty, I started thinking maybe not, and then I saw the taxi drop you off last night. I saw you go in alone. I saw there was no one waiting for you. No one taking care of you. And I knew something was wrong. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. I did not know I still had tears left. I thought I had spent them all, but there they were, falling down my frozen face. Tears of gratitude, of relief, of shame, of everything. I should have come sooner, Artie said, his voice now breaking too. I should have come last night. I should have knocked on your door. I should have insisted. Forgive me. Eleanor, please, forgive me. I moved my head, just a little, barely a movement, trying to tell him there was nothing to forgive, that he had done more than anyone, more than my own family, that he had saved me when no one else even thought to check if I was okay. Sirens in the distance, getting louder, closer. Red and blue lights filled the living room through the window, running footsteps, loud voices. Paramedics entering my house with medical gear, surrounding me, asking questions that Artie answered because I could not. How long was she like this? I do not know. I found her 10 minutes ago. Any pre-existing medical conditions? 70 years old. Widow. Recently. Just arrived from a funeral. Family nearby. Artie paused. A long and heavy pause. She has a son. I do not know where he is. I do not know where he is. 6 words that summarized my situation perfectly. My son existed, but nobody knew where he was when his mother needed him. Nobody knew why he was not there. Because he had been too busy. Because he had had a perfect night with his glass of wine and his fireplace while I died of hypothermia just 20 miles away. They put me on a stretcher. They hooked me up to machines. They put an oxygen mask on my face. They covered me with thermal blankets. Everything happened in a fog. I heard voices, but I did not process the words. I felt movement, but I did not know where they were moving me. The last thing I saw before the ambulance doors closed was Artie standing on my porch. A 75-year-old man with tears in his eyes. A neighbor I barely knew, but who had cared more about me than my own blood. A stranger who had saved my life when my family had not even asked if I got home okay. The doors closed. The sirens started again. And while the ambulance moved through the streets toward the hospital, I could only think of one thing. Of Michael and Jessica sitting on their sofa, with their glasses of wine, with their fireplace, with their perfect night, with no idea what was happening, with no idea that in a few hours, when they turned on the news, that perfect night would turn into their worst nightmare. I woke up in a hospital bed, bright lights, constant beeping of machines, tubes connected to my arms, a heavy thermal blanket over my body. Everything hurt, every muscle, every bone, as if someone had beaten me with a hammer for hours. A nurse appeared at my side almost immediately. Mrs. Davis, welcome back. How do you feel? Her voice was kind, professional, but I could see the concern in her eyes. What happened? I managed to whisper. My throat burned. My voice sounded like sandpaper. You arrived with severe hypothermia. Your body temperature was at 90 degrees when they brought you in. It is a miracle you are alive. If your neighbor had not found you when he did, she left the sentence unfinished. She did not need to finish it. We both knew how it would have ended. How long have I been here? I asked. 6 hours. It is 4 in the morning. We have been working to stabilize you. Your temperature is already at 95. Still low, but better. The doctors want to keep you under observation at least 24 hours. 24 hours. more hospital bills, more money I did not have. I cannot pay for this, I said. The tears started again. I do not have enough insurance for this. The nurse put her hand over mine. Do not worry about that now. The important thing is that you are okay. We will see about the rest later. Does anyone know I am here? I asked. My family. The nurse hesitated. Your neighbor, Mr. Artie Miller, left a contact number. He said it was your son. We called him 4 hours ago. We left a voicemail explaining the situation and giving him the number of this room. He still hasn't called back. 4 hours. My son had received a message 4 hours ago telling him his mother was in the hospital with severe hypothermia, and he had not called, he had not come, he had not done anything. Do you want us to try calling him again? Asked the nurse. No, I replied. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. Do not bother him. He is busy. The nurse looked at me with an expression I could not completely decipher. Pity, maybe, or understanding, or maybe just sadness for an old woman who was alone in a hospital and whose son did not bother to call. There is someone else here, she said after a moment. Your neighbor, Artie. He has been in the waiting room all night. He does not want to leave until he knows you are okay. He wants to see you. Yes, I said. Please. Minutes later, Artie entered the room. He looked exhausted, red eyes, wrinkled clothes, but he smiled when he saw me awake. Thank God, he said. I thought I had lost you. You saved my life, I managed to say. If you hadn't come, do not think about that, he interrupted. The important thing is that you are here, you are alive. You are going to be okay. How did you know? I asked. How did you know something was wrong? He sat in the chair next to my bed. Arthur was my friend, he said simply. We talked all the time. He told me about you, about Michael, about everything. The last time we talked, 2 weeks ago, he told me he was worried. He said that if something happened to him, to please look after you, that your son had drifted away and that you had no one else. The tears returned. He always thought of me, even at the end. I know, Artie said. That is why, when I saw your house last night, when I saw you arrive alone, I knew I had to be watchful, Arthur had asked me. And I was not going to fail him. I was not going to fail you. We stayed in silence for a moment. Then Artie spoke again. The media is here, he said carefully. Outside the hospital. They want to talk to you. The media. I did not understand. Why? Because this became a news story, he explained. A 70-year-old woman almost dies of hypothermia in her own house the same day she buried her husband. The paramedics talked. The neighbors talked. The story spread. And when someone mentioned that your son lives only 20 miles away and did not pick you up from the airport, well, people got outraged. My stomach tightened. I do not want to cause trouble. You did not cause anything, Artie said firmly. They caused this, with their indifference, with their cruelty. And now the world knows it. Does Michael know? I asked. Does he know this is news? Not yet, I think, but he will know soon. It airs on the 6 o'clock morning news, in 2 hours, and it is all over social media. People are sharing the story. They are outraged. They want to know what kind of son leaves his 70-year-old mother alone the day she buried her husband. I closed my eyes. This was not how I wanted this to happen. I did not want revenge. I did not want public humiliation. I just wanted my son to realize, to see what he had done, to understand the pain he had caused. You do not have to talk to the media if you do not want to, Artie said. You can stay here. Recover. Let this pass. I opened my eyes and looked at him. And what is going to happen when I get out of here? When I go back to that cold and empty house? When I am alone again and nobody worries if I am okay? Artie took my hand. You are not going to be alone, he promised. I am going to be there. The neighbors are going to be there. I already talked to several. Everyone is willing to help, to take care of you, to make sure you are okay. But they are not my family, I whispered. No, he admitted, we are not. But we are here, and your family is not. Sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family of blood. He was right. I knew it. But it hurt anyway. It hurt knowing that strangers cared more about me than my own son. It hurt, knowing that a 75-year-old neighbor had been awake all night in a waiting room while my son slept comfortably in his big house with his wife and his fireplace. What should I do? I asked. Whatever you want, Artie replied. This is your life. Your decision. Nobody else has the right to tell you what to do. I thought about that. About my life. About my decisions. For 70 years, I had let others make decisions for me. My first husband decided to leave. My second husband decided I should stay home. Michael decided to drift away. Jessica decided I should plan better. Everyone had decided. Everyone except me. But now it was different. Now I had a choice. I could stay quiet. I could let this pass without saying anything. I could go back to being invisible. Or I could do something different. I could speak. I could tell my story. I could let the world know exactly what had happened. Not for revenge, but for truth. Because maybe, just maybe, my story could help someone else. Another 70-year-old woman who felt invisible. Another mother whose children had drifted away. Another wife who had just lost her partner and found herself completely alone. I'm going to talk to them, I said finally. I am going to tell my story. Artie nodded. I will be with you if you need me. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for worrying when no one else did. In 2 hours, Michael and Jessica would turn on their TV to watch the morning news while drinking their coffee. And there, on the screen, they would see the story of a 70-year-old woman who almost died in her own house. They would see my photo. They would hear my name. And in that moment, when the coffee cup fell from their hands, they would finally understand what they had done. The 6 o'clock news opened with my story. I knew it because the nurse came running into my room 15 minutes later. It is everywhere, she said. On TV, on the internet, on social media, everyone is talking about you. Artie arrived shortly after with his phone in his hand. Michael just called the hospital, he said. The receptionist told me. He was screaming, demanding to see you, saying that the media is camped in front of his house, that the neighbors are confronting him, that his wife is crying, that all this is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I repeated. The word sounded absurd. What part is the misunderstanding? The part where he told me to call an Uber? The part where he did not check if I got home okay? The part where 4 hours passed without him answering when the hospital notified him I was here? He is coming here, Artie warned. He will arrive any moment. Good, I said. And this time my voice did not tremble. Let him come. 20 minutes later, Michael burst into my room. Jessica came behind him. Both looked destroyed. Red eyes, clothes put on hastily. Michael's face was undone. Mom, he started. Mom, thank God you are okay. When I saw the news, I almost died. I could not believe that. That what? I interrupted him. That I almost died because you left me alone? That a stranger had to save me because you were too busy? That the world now knows exactly what kind of son you are? It wasn't like that, he protested. You don't understand. We had plans. Commitments. We couldn't just cancel them. I finished for him. You couldn't cancel your plans to pick up your mother the day she buried her husband. I understand perfectly, Michael. Maybe for the first time in my life, I understand completely. Jessica took a step forward. Eleanor, we didn't want this to happen. If we had known the heat wasn't working, that you were in danger, obviously we would have come. Obviously. The word came out like a bark. Not obviously, Jessica. Because if you really cared, you would have checked. You would have called. You would have asked if I arrived okay. But you didn't. Because you were busy having your perfect night. Jessica went pale. You saw the message. I saw the message. I confirmed. I saw your perfect photo with your wine glasses and your fireplace while I was dying of cold 20 miles away. I saw exactly where your priorities are. Mom, this is getting out of control, said Michael. His voice now had a tone of panic. The media is saying horrible things. People on social media are attacking us. My boss called me asking what is going on. The neighbors won't speak to us. You need to tell them it was a misunderstanding. That we didn't know. What? That I save you, I asked? That I clean up your image? That I lie so you don't have to face the consequences of your own actions? It's not lying, he insisted. It's clarifying things. It's giving context. We love you. We have always loved you. Only that. Only that. Not enough, I finished. You love me, Michael, but not enough to give me 30 minutes of your time. Not enough to check if I am okay. Not enough to be the son I needed when I needed you most. Silence filled the room. Michael looked at the floor. Jessica wiped her tears. Artie remained in the corner, watching everything. Finally, Michael spoke again. His voice was different now, smaller, more broken. You are right, he whispered. You are right about everything. I have been a bad son. I drifted away. I ignored you. I put my life, my comfort, my convenience above you. And I almost killed you for it. He looked up and I could see he was really crying, genuine tears running down his face. I am sorry, Mom. I am so sorry. I don't know how this happened. I don't know at what moment I became this person. But you are right. I was cruel. I was selfish. And I almost lost you because of it. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to keep that cold rage I had felt. But seeing him there, seeing him truly broken for the first time in years, something in me softened. Just a little. You almost lost me, I repeated. And that is the truth you cannot change, Michael. No matter how sorry you are now, no matter how many apologies you say, that truth remains. I know, he said, and I am going to have to live with that the rest of my life. But Mom, please, let me fix it. Let me be better. Let me be the son I should have always been. It is not that simple, I replied. You cannot just show up now and expect everything to be okay. It does not work like that. I do not expect it to be okay, said Michael. I hope to have the chance to try, to prove to you that I can change, that I can be better. I looked at Artie. He nodded slightly. A silent signal that the decision was mine, that he would respect whatever I chose. If I am going to give you that chance, I said slowly, it will be on my terms, not yours. For the first time in my life, I am going to put my needs first. I am going to set boundaries. And if you cannot respect them, then there will not be a second chance. Do you understand? Michael nodded vigorously. Whatever. I will do whatever. First I said, I am going to stay with Artie when I get out of the hospital, until my house is fixed, until I am ready to go back. And when I go back, it won't be alone. There will be help. Real help. I will get you the best help, promised Michael. I will pay for everything. The furnace, the repairs, a nurse if you need one. Whatever. Second, I continued, I am no longer going to be invisible in your life. I am not going to beg for attention. If you want a relationship with me, you are going to have to work for it. You are going to have to show up. Regularly. Not when it is convenient. Not when you feel guilty. Regularly. I will do it, he said. I promise. And third, I said, looking at Jessica, the criticism ends. The passive-aggressive comments end. Either you treat me with respect or you do not treat me at all. Jessica nodded, still crying. I am sorry, Eleanor. I really am sorry. I was horrible to you. Yes, I agreed. You were. But you have the chance to be better. Both of you do. Do not waste it. The following days were a whirlwind. The story eventually stopped being news. The media left. Social media found something new to be outraged about. But in my small life, everything had changed. Michael came every day, sometimes twice a day. He brought food. He sat with me. We talked, really talked. For the first time in years, my son saw me. He listened to me. He included me. Artie fixed my furnace with help from other neighbors. He refused to let me pay. Arthur was my friend, he said. This is what friends do. A social worker from the hospital connected me with community services, help with medical bills, a support group for widows, resources I did not know existed. And slowly, very slowly, I began to heal. Not just my body, but something deeper, something that had been broken for a long time. 3 months later, when I finally went back to my house, I was not alone. Artie was there. Michael was there. Several neighbors were there. The house was warm, clean, ready for me. Michael was not perfect. He still made mistakes. He still sometimes forgot to call. But he was trying, really trying, and that meant something. I had spent 70 years being invisible. 70 years putting others first. 70 years, sacrificing myself without asking for anything in return. It almost cost me my life. But I survived. And on the other side of that experience, I found something I did not know I needed. I found my voice. I found my boundaries. I found my worth. I am no longer the woman who apologizes for existing. I am no longer the mother who accepts crumbs and calls that love. I am Eleanor Davis. I am 70 years old. I am a survivor. And finally, for the first time in my life, I am free.